to another in our series, Who is this Jesus? And before I start today, hopefully you've read chapter 6. If you haven't read chapter 6, go and give it a brief read before we start. Here we're starting to get really into that question, who is this Jesus? Who will you say he is? And in this chapter we see a number of people encountering some of the things that Jesus is doing. And I'm just going to read you a little short excerpt from what they said. And he said, "Where did this man get these things?" he asks. "What's this wisdom that has been given to him? What are these remarkable miracles he's doing? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't it Mary's son? Isn't this the brother of James, Joseph, Judas and Simon?" That's not the bad Judas, that's a good Judas. "Aren't his sisters with us?" And then it says this really strange thing, they were not pleased with him at all. So Jesus is doing all these amazing things and doing miracles right in front of them, and they end up displeased with Jesus. And the problem is, they thought they knew Jesus too well. They were too familiar with him. And sometimes it can be difficult to receive or hear things from someone we know well, or in a setting that we've got really familiar with. But God uses all sorts of people to help us in our journey. And many of these people are those people who are close to us. Just because you know someone in the past doesn't mean they're still that same person. You know, we write a lot of people off and don't allow them to change or develop or grow or mature or Jesus to work on them. And I want to encourage you to learn from those close to you who know Jesus, and from others who perhaps you're just getting to know. So how do you judge? How do you judge who you can learn from and who's going to help you and who perhaps won't be as helpful? How do you judge? Jesus says you judge people by their fruits. Are they willing to take time with you? Do you see them loving people and serving people? Do you see humility? Well, what's humility? Well, humility is not this weak thing. Humility is knowing and behaving that they are more dependent on Jesus than on themselves. So it's all about Jesus and not about drawing people to themselves. It's about pointing people to Jesus, not gathering people to themselves. And Jesus says, watch for all these sorts of fruits. And growth might take time. It might take time for you to learn to trust somebody. It may take time for you to get to know somebody and assess whether those fruits are there. But it's important that you don't exclude folks just because they're familiar or you knew them in the past. Take time, you'll find a few, and they will be absolute gems in your life. Now, the other thing I want you to notice from this passage is it says that Jesus couldn't do many miracles because they had no faith. Faith is key. Faith is key to everything in the kingdom. Faith, if you like, is the currency of the kingdom. It's what makes everything work. The Bible tells us it's actually impossible to please God without faith. So if we're operating without faith, it means that God isn't actually being pleased with the way we're behaving. And the faith is the key. It's kind of the link between what's true in heaven and seeing it become real on earth. It unlocks the promises of God in your life. In a letter to the Hebrew churches, in chapter 4, verse 2, and you'll get to read this one day in the future, it says that the gospel was preached to them as well as to us. But it didn't profit them, it didn't do them any good because they didn't mix it with faith. So everybody hears the gospel, but it only does them any good if they mix it with faith. So we can have the gospel, things about Jesus preached up and down this land, but unless we believe it and walk in faith in it and trust Jesus and become dependent on Jesus, it won't do us any good. It's not enough to hear, it's not enough to know principles, it's not enough to know stories. We actually have to act in faith and trust on what Jesus said and what he asks us to do. You know, that's the reason we started the church that we lead and the ministry that we lead, Faithlife Ministries. because we wanted people to walk in faith and see the power of the kingdom in their life. And you say, well, you know, some people's immediate response is, well, where do I get faith? Well, you've got faith already. You just don't know it. In fact, you used faith when you became a believer. You heard about Jesus. You believed the truth. You asked for God's help for your life. In other words, you acted on that faith. And you altered and adjusted your actions and life towards that new faith. You've already used faith. But faith will grow if you do the right things. Faith comes by hearing the word of God. So we need to hear the word of God. Faith comes through as a fruit of the Spirit. So we need to spend time listening to the voice of the Spirit, spend time in prayer, hearing the voice of God. And faith comes by seeing things that God does in your life and does in other lives, other people's lives, hearing their testimonies and being thankful and praising God for that. And that will grow your faith. So stick around and your faith will grow. Do the right things, your faith will grow. And I'll see you tomorrow. Before I see you, read chapter 6 again and I'll be back then.